some Chon one six, and many bay use on Kevin if you are. We shall if you want to pay for Amazon who are when you did your cocoto. A lady be okay, palace, a lady more okay, palace, a lepizuko okay, palace. I'm out with you him. It's all about a peace. Kebaloba.
Phones in a doom, stores out to doom, police say you foom, and we say soon. To pay a papa, depending on how Shakuma Muma, Memina Danima, Fabuba, would don't know what it is. What's the Mudania to Photo Gem, over BBC.
Anna, it's no more.
Picture free me, you no war.
Said of the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons and daughters of God. Hey, we pray for love, we pray for peace, we pray for unity.
Sampaetia Obayansa Fuso Bunia one can some Temafu to some Kakre was supreme. Yo, coffee, oh my woman, oh many a mamma, Denny baby, watch out, Warren. One some, one nipa, as I did power of you.
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Energy Town Hall meeting organized by the Ghana Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. We call them CBOD. My name is Parkwisi Asare. I work with Media General, and I will be your moderator and master of ceremonies for today's program. I'd like to tell you a little bit about CBOD and what they do. So CBOD serves as the advocacy, lobby, and representative body of the industry. The CBOD also functions as an industry research and strategy unit committed to enhancing the industry's commercial viability and sustainability. The chamber currently has a membership of 47, made up of 37 buy decks, 7 storage depots, and 3 PSPs. In a short while, I will be introducing, or if you like, acknowledging the presence of some very distinguished personalities who are here with us today. I'm sure you do recall, for those of you who were here last week, we had the session for the New Patriotic Party. They essentially also introduced to us their policies on the energy and petroleum sector. And of course, we have the former energy minister and now running mate to Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia, the Honorable Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh here with us to answer a few questions and also to essentially give us an overview of what the NPP intends to do if and when they win power in the 2024 general elections in December. I'd like to encourage you to just look on the screen right here. We're going to be putting a QR code there. Kindly take your mobile phones and scan that QR code and register for this program. That's the QR code. That's what I'm talking about. Just take your mobile phones from wherever you're sitting inside this hall and show it to the screen, and you will be able to register. After that, there will be another QR code which will give you an overview of the program lineup for today. So kindly do that for us as well. All right, so if we're done with that, let me just quickly acknowledge the presence of some very distinguished personalities who are here with us this afternoon. I'll start off by introducing the Honorable Edward Abambiri Bawa, who's MP for Bongo constituency. I don't know if he's here with us right now, but of course he'll be here. He's on his way coming. He's a member of Parliament and also a member of the Mines and Energy Committee. I'll duly acknowledge him if and when he gets here. We also have Dr. Kwame Ampofu, who is former chairman of the Energy Commission and former MP for South Dai. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Please acknowledge him with a round of applause. We also have the Honorable Thomas Ampem-Nyako, his member of Parliament for the Esujaman constituency. Ladies and gentlemen, please show him some love. We also have the Honorable Richard Jan Mensah, who's member of Parliament for the Gomwa West constituency. Please put your hands together for him as well. Of course, the object of interest, the most important person here tonight, is the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapo, his member of Parliament for Yape Kusugu. I hope I pronounced that right. And chairman of the Energy Committee of the NDC. He's also the ranking member on the Energy and Mines and the Finance Committee of Parliament. Please show him some love. I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of representatives of some stakeholder bodies and CSOs. We've got Duncan Amwa here. He is with COPEC. Duncan, welcome. Please put your hands together for him. Thank you very much for coming. Let me introduce to you the Let me introduce to you the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors, Dr. Patrick Ofori. Please put your hands together for him. So let me start off by inviting Dr. Patrick Ofori to give us a brief preview to today's program and to also share a few words with us. Please put your hands together for him.
Thank you, distinguished guests, honorable MPs, and my former MD. What many of you don't know, Dr. Kwame Ampofo, former MD of Tema Oil Refinery. Welcome, sir. Good evening, distinguished guests and industry colleagues, the media, and the representative from the National Democratic Congress. I welcome you all to this special occasion. The CBOD Energy Townhall policy, as has already been touted to you by our MC Pakwesi. As you know, this platform provides a unique opportunity for key downstream industry members and the entire energy sector to engage and have dialogue about key manifesto policies. It also presents us an opportunity for us to engage our various political entities that has a goodwill for our sector. It presents to us an opportunity for us to ask key questions about the sector and how we intend to let the sector be governed. The purpose of this is to foster open dialogue, understanding between the energy sector and our political leaders. We believe that such interactions are crucial for the development and growth of our industry and then also our mother, Ghana. Today, we have the privilege of hosting the National Democratic Congress. Their representative will share their party manifesto promises for the petroleum and the energy sector especially. Following the presentation, we will open the floodgate for questions to engage, for us to also interrogate, and most importantly, ask probing questions for the manifesto committee members of NDC here to provide us the rationale behind key manifesto promises that they intend to govern the country should in case God grant them the opportunity and the voters here in and all over Ghana vote for them into power. I encourage all participants to engage actively and then also ask very insightful questions that will contribute to making informed decisions going into next election, and then also ask questions that pertain to your investment into the future and already the investment that you've made in the sector, how it's going to be protected. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward for a fruitful deliberations. Thank you and welcome once again to the CBOD Manifesto Town Hall.
Another round of applause for the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors, Dr. Patrick Ofori. Let me go back to acknowledging the presence of the Member of Parliament for the Bongo constituency and also member of the Mines and Energy Committee, the Honorable Edward Bauer. He's just joined us. Please put your hands together for him. Thank you very much. I'd like to encourage you, for those of you who are seated back, kindly come forward so we can have some uniformity. So the ushers kindly assist them. Those of you at the back, please come forward. Let's fill in the seats in front. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to kickstart the program. Help me to welcome the Honorable John Abdullah Jinapo, who's Member of Parliament for the Yape Kusugu and Chairman of the Energy Committee, and also the NDC ranking member on Energy and Mines, as well as the Finance Committee of Parliament, to give us a presentation of what the NDC hopes to deliver in the petroleum industry. Please put your hands together for him.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As you would recall, His Excellency the President had a meeting with all the stakeholders. We also had a meeting with the petroleum sector. And so when we received the invitation, we thought that it was work in progress and that we're all working to ensure that we are on the same wavelength and to address the many challenges confronting this nation, particularly in the energy sector, because the challenges are enormous and the challenges appear to be compounding. Indeed, just when I was coming today, I saw a letter from Sinon Asogli on the curtailment of the supply of power of almost 600 megawatts because government has failed and the power sector has failed to pay liabilities and debt that keeps mounting. And as we speak, that's about $300 million. And so the situation keeps exacerbating, the situation keeps worsening, and it gets bad and bad by the day. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may be aware, we normally have the petroleum sector and the power sector. And so I'll do some brief remarks on the petroleum sector, on the power sector, and do more with the petroleum sector. And so the moderator, if I can have you for just 1 minute, just a moment. So, like I said, we have the power sector and the petroleum sector. And in the petroleum sector, you have upstream and downstream. In the power sector, you normally have to generate, transmit, and distribute that power. In the power sector, you could also have renewable and non-renewable, conventional and non-conventional, and all kinds of descriptions depending on how you look at it. There's always been the argument that once you have enough installed capacity, it means that your problem is solved. And we just thought that we should give you some background. In 2007, when we had the load shedding, our installed capacity was almost 2,000. The peak demand was about 1,300. And so we had more than 700 megawatts of redundancy if you had to do only with installed capacity. But because of our generation mix, if the hydrology is not good or you have some fuel challenges, you could still have load shedding. Fast forward in 2013, 2014, you still had very good redundancy, but then we lost about 800 megawatts from the hydro dam because the dam was dried up. And so that called for diversification so that we can manage the system. And our policy proposals from 2009 was to develop a robust, resilient, and efficient power sector and also transition, and that is where the petroleum sector comes in, from light crude oil into a gas to power era. Particularly when we discovered oil in 2017, our main objective was to maximize not just the oil find, but the entire value chain by developing our gas infrastructure and also dealing with the financial health of both the power sector and the petroleum sector whilst promoting local content and local participation. And so, as you may be aware, we brought on board so many generation plants that were diversified. KTPP, TICO, Combined Cycle, Car Power, Ameri, AXA, and most of them were dual fuel. They could use gas, some could use light crude oil, some could use distillate fuel, in order to give you that flexibility within the sector, such that when you have a problem with one sector, you can also deal with the other sector. But you cannot deal with generation if you don't also address the transmission mechanism. And all that you see, the bulk supply points and the 330 kVA lines and all that you see enabled us to transport power from Ghana to our neighboring countries such as Burkina, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, And now, looking at the current West African power pool, 14 countries are interconnected, either with the 275 kVA or 330 kVA. And so Ghana is in a position now to export power all the way to Nigeria. Then finally is the distribution sector. And like I said, Sinan Asogli has just suspended supply of more than 500 megawatts of power because of the distribution sector. When the power is supplied and you do not recover the amounts at the distribution level, the entire value chain is affected. And so we sought to reduce the losses from 22% to 8% using the 500 million Millennium Challenge Corporation money to particularly invest in ECG, boost the bulk supply points, have more meters, introduce smart meters, and also we introduced the energy sector levies, which is today generated over 40 billion to this government to address the legacy debt whilst we seek to reduce the losses. Unfortunately, because of the political interference that we witnessed, the PDA scandal rocked the nation, and the U.S. government had to withdraw $190 million in respect of the compact. And because of some of this political and unnecessary interference, today the losses is gone to about 32%, what we call the ATCC, aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. And so today, we have an installed capacity of 5,454 megawatts, a dependable capacity of 4,843, and a peak demand of 3,000. So you have more than 1,500 megawatts of redundant power. And yet, there's load shedding. Even today, our exports, we are shedding a lot, especially to CEB. So clearly, the power sector is not being managed well. This should have been the way the cash waterfall mechanism works. The generation sector takes 66%, transmission 10%, and the distribution sector 22%. And that is what will flow into the petroleum sector, so that the gas that is supplied from upstream and processed for consumption, then the petroleum sector can also function effectively. But you and I can recall that PURC has consistently complained that, one, the money is inadequate. Two, ECG has not adhered to the cash waterfall mechanism. Three, there's unnecessary political interference, particularly with the procurement of light crude oil. And this government having slept on the job, today the gas that they touted as being so much, the gas is no more inadequate. And now they procure light crude oil of about $40 million every month. So this year alone, we estimate that they will procure $480 million worth of light crude oil. That amount could have established another gas processing plant. But since assuming office, with Ghana Gas, despite handing over the gas infrastructure and the gas processing plant, this government has not added even 1 kilometer of gas pipeline. Neither have they added anything significant to what they inherited from the NDC in respect of the upstream and downstream petroleum sector. There are so many reasons why we are seeing all these challenges. And on a daily basis since January, there have been some interruptions, and sometimes they shed about 500 megawatts of power. This is basically due to gas shortfall, which has crippled the sector, and also, like I said, non-adherence to the cash waterfall mechanism. And a lot of contractual obligations that this government is not adhering to. If you look at the judgments that we've incurred, a lot of them were avoidable, a lot of them were unnecessary, but because of the unnecessary political interference, we've had to deal with a lot of judgment debt currently affecting us. In the petroleum sector, the NDC is very proud of our track record. Through consistent and pragmatic measures that we put in place, we delivered 3 FPSOs. We brought on board the Jubilee field, we brought on board the 10 field, and we brought on board the OCT fields. In addition to that, like I said, we constructed the Atuabo gas processing plant at a cost of about $1 billion.
And that gas infrastructure has been a game changer. Indeed, in 2022, because of crude oil and gas import substitution, this country saved over 1 billion. If we did not have the gas infrastructure, we would have spent more than 1 billion importing light crude oil. And then, as you may be aware, the OCTP field has an integrated gas processing plant. People always think that it's just the Atuabo gas processing plant. In fact, the OCTP field alone contributes about 60% of our gas infrastructure. We passed the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. We passed the Petroleum Exploration and Production Law. We also passed the local content legislation to allow you, local entrepreneurs, to have a very, very effective way of participating in the petroleum sector. We also made significant investments in the thermal oil refinery, deregulated the petroleum sector so that we do not keep accumulating the debt that we accumulated, particularly from forex issues. And, like I said, the energy sector levy, we did not just pass the energy sector levy, we handed over an amount of $234 million sitting in the account at the time we were leaving office. So these three pictures that you see are the FPSOs. The FPSOs are huge ships where the oil is extracted and pumped to the shore. And indeed, as for the OCTP, not only do we pump oil, we also process gas in situ and deliver lean gas for the thermal industries. And this is a picture of the Atuabo gas processing plant that we bequeathed to the Akufo-Addo administration from the hard work of the NDC government. And this is also the thermal oil refinery. Unfortunately, for about 4 years now, the thermal oil refinery has not been working. Government took an initial decision to turn it into a tank farm, and recently they attempted to sell it off. And we have stated clearly that we would not support the selling off of the thermal oil refinery. We rather believe that we can get a private sector in a JV so that we can revamp this oil refinery to deliver about 45,000 barrels of crude oil processing on a daily basis. And so, because of our intervention in the gas sector, as you can see, from 2014, we had only 55. Now we are doing 255,000 MNSCAF. And that should tell you that the gas infrastructure is a game changer. Indeed, in the oil sector, as you can see, total receipts of about 9 billion, 9.8 billion from 2011 to 2023. And out of this, about 75% of that accrued to the Akufo-Addo-led administration. And so if you take our 8 years, and they are 8 years, as you can see the figures, from 2017 to 2023, the oil revenues that accrued to the Akufo-Addo government is more than double what accrued to President Mahama and President Akufo-Addo. And like I said, the energy sector levies, we got only 3 billion. They are receiving 45 billion. Petroleum revenues, we got just about 3 billion. They are receiving 7.4 billion. Eurobond, we got just about 3 billion. They've received 11 billion. Bank of Ghana financing was zero in 2016. In 2022, 54 billion. And as we speak, Bank of Ghana alone is financed this government by about 70 billion. Stabilization levy, 200 million accrued to them. But the current situation is very worrying, ladies and gentlemen. And that is why the NDC believes that we ought to have a change and to reset this government. The oil refinery is on its knees. You and I know that oil production has declined by more than 30%. And Ghana's oil sector is collapsing. Most of the major oil companies are leaving Ghana. And Adako has left Ghana. ExxonMobil has left Ghana. ENI is in court. And ENI is investing more in La Côte d'Ivoire than in Ghana. And they are making huge discoveries. Indeed, even access to electricity, we moved it from 50 to about 84%. this government is moving from just about 84% to 86%. So whilst we did about 30 percentage point increase in 8 years, they are doing just about 4% thereabout. And that should tell you that, look, this sector is simply not doing well. Unstable power supply, export to all our neighboring countries have been reduced and curtailed drastically. And we are losing the necessary forex exchange. The ECG's losses alone in 2022 was more than 10 billion cedis. Last year, their losses more than 6 billion cedis. So in 2 years, the ECG's loss is about 16 billion cedis. In 2016, when we were leaving office, ECG made a profit of more than 300 million cedis. And that is the state of the energy sector. This chart tells you the projection, the red line. We should have been increasing our oil production year by year up to here. But today, this is where we are. And look at the gap. When Kenny Ofori-Atta went to borrow money from the Eurobond, he promised them that he will move daily production from 190,000 to 400,000 barrels a day. It has since declined to about 130-something thousand barrels. And so this is the true state of the petroleum sector when it comes to the upstream. And normally in the petroleum sector, what you do is that after you've discovered oil, you do an appraisal, first oil, very minimum, and you start building up. And when you build up and you reach this peak, you want it to plateau for a very long time before you start declining and then you decommission. But we just went up and immediately we are coming down. And that is very worrying because in the petroleum sector, one bad news follows another bad news. And so when Exxon leaves, when Anadaku leaves, when ENI is in court, nobody would want to invest in Ghana. And when we attend international conferences, people are asking critical questions about Ghana, and it's really, 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 really terrible. If we had gas, we wouldn't have imported 1.1 billion worth of HFO. So clearly, we're having a major, major problem. And the sector has been bedeviled with so much scandals under this government. A few of them is the Ameri scandal, which had to lead to the dismissal of a whole cabinet minister. PDS scandal, the GPGC judgment debt, ENI judgment debt, Sahara's judgment debt. And when you put all these judgment debts together, the amount from these judgment debts could have put in place a second gas processing plant. And so these are some of the issues that we would have to deal with when we assume office. And on assumption of office, we cannot claim to know all. We want to work with you, particularly CBOD. One of the areas we will look at is the Gold for Oil program. It has failed to achieve its objective. We find it bureaucratic, and we think that it needs to be reformed. We cannot continue the way this government is going about with the Gold for Oil. There are huge losses accruing to Bank of Ghana. And now you members of CBOD, hitherto you could get about 50% of your forest requirement. Today you are unable to get even 15% of your forest requirement. Because that same forest that would have come to Bank of Ghana to be used to give you, for you to import your products, they've decided to hijack it up there and doing all kinds of funny things with Tor over there. So let me assure you, on assumption of office, we shall review this policy. We shall ensure that the forex is readily made available to you, and that this obnoxious policy would be a thing of the past. We would not continue the way it is. Last week, I heard the president say that the Gold for Oil was not for the stability of the city. I mean, that is what they've always told us. They've always told us that Gold for Oil is to stabilize. And I think Napo also said that. What did they tell us when we were doing Gold for Oil? They said it was supposed to arrest the fall of the city. The city has since been falling. And you have a whole vice presidential candidate who was once a minister of energy exhibiting such level of incompetence when it comes to even information flow. So if they go for oil, it's not supposed to deal with forex. It's not supposed to deal with shortages. It's not supposed to deal with price increment. Then why go for oil? Because government policies are meant to address a particular challenge. Policies are not implemented out of the blue. And policies have certain key ingredients. So I find it very bizarre that they decide to get into this matter, and now they are virtually denying that. But I am confident, and I know that the NDC will win this election. I'm certain about that, because our track record is superior. The suffering, the mismanagement, the incompetence, and the corruption that has bedeviled this sector, there surely ought to be a reset. And we believe that Dr. Bawumia cannot hold his own members accountable. And so even for the sake of accountability, for the sake of prudence, and for the sake of good governance and good management, these guys have to pack bag and baggage so that they will be answerable for some of the very bizarre decisions they've taken in terms of policy and its implementation. We want to have a resilient, robust power sector. And that ought to form a linkage with the petroleum sector. We also left a very robust gas to power era where when we're living, we had enough gas. Today, we don't have enough gas. The gas is inadequate. And so we would ensure that we put in place the mechanisms to bring on board the second gas processing plant. President Mahama has engaged all the sector players, and we are confident that there's enough raw gas to feed our second plant. And that is something we intend to do. Then we want to increase power to neighboring countries. And then we would utilize the energy sector levies for their intended purpose. Part of it is supposed to go into the petroleum sector. That is not being done. We would adhere to the tenets of the energy sector levy. We will not borrow those monies and use it for non-power or non-petroleum related activities. And then we would ensure that we adhere to the cash water flow mechanism. We intend to promote a 24-hour economy with adequate, reliable, and affordable power supply, as well as petroleum supply, to ensure that we have accelerated inclusive growth. And like we said, we would implement a time of use tariff to give the necessary incentives to industry and businesses to work around the clock. And when we say a 24-hour economy, we are not saying that 3 people will be competing for the same job. What we are saying is that they can run a shift. And so this idea by the running mate, that even God sleeps in the night, and hence you cannot implement a 24-hour economy, he simply doesn't understand what he's talking about. In the UK, even in Ghana here, check with the meter manufacturing companies. They run in shift of 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. And so if it's happening in Ghana in a micro element or in a micro sector, why can't we replicate it so that we can bring on board more industries and factories? But that is anchored on the provision of reliable, cheap power, which is also anchored on the petroleum sector. And so we need to form that linkage to ensure that we deal with that situation. But we are also aware of the energy transition. And so clean energy consumption in line with our energy transition would be one. For instance, if you take the levies that we pay, one of them has to be used for premix fuel. We want to split that fund into 2 and use one for outboard motors that uses rechargeable batteries. And with modern technology, now the rechargeable batteries can do 48 hours. And what artisanal fishermen do is that they go and come back the same day. So if you give them 2 batteries with solar panels, it means that they can even stay for more than 48 hours without having challenges. We also want to match our generation with consumption so that we don't incur so much debt. And also, like I said, hydro power, we would isolate it and use it for industry, but increase renewable energy up to 10% of the share of non-hydro power. We shall also transparently manage the energy sector levies. Government alone owes 1.8 billion since January, and they haven't paid that money. We would ensure that it is properly utilized and that all of you will benefit from that. Review the operations of the power utilities, significantly reduce the losses, and make budgetary provisions where MMDAs consume power so that we can address the challenges. Our Light Up Ghana would ensure that almost all the street lights that are not working today, the street light levy is used for that intended purpose, and restore Ghana as a leading and reliable power exporter in West Africa. We shall also promote the use of electric vehicles in a phase-out manner with you, so that you do not suffer from policy disruption and interventions. Rural electrification, we intend to achieve universal access by 2028. This government has said 2030, but our track record shows that we can achieve that. And we would prioritize procurement of locally manufactured goods to increase local content and participation, restore credibility in the sector, reduce the unnecessary corruption in the sector, and bring about transparency. We shall implement legislative provisions to improve incentives to attract investments in the upstream petroleum sector. And that is very, very key. We still need the big boys, but if you don't give them the incentives, you will surely not have them. And that is an area that we really want to work on, as well as increase the acreage sizes and ensure that we optimize and use modern technology, especially in deep water, so that we can increase our petroleum resources. Also, the Voltairean Basin, we intend to accelerate the pace of exploration so that we can achieve our set targets. Gas utilization beyond power is something that we shall implement aggressively. What we believe is that apart from the power sector, the petrochemical sector, the agri sector, and particularly LPG, because of what we did with Atuabo gas, today we supply about 40% of domestic LPG. When we bring on board the second gas processing plant, we believe that we can eventually supply 100% LPG domestically with you, CBOD, so that we can cut down on the level of deforestation. Recently, we went on a campaign tour, and I tell you, the level at which the trees are being cut for charcoal is unimaginable. We launched the cylinder promotion program, which increased LPG consumption by about 6% annually. We are now seeing a decline, and we shall revisit that cylinder promotion program, which Honorable Boy in particular spearheaded. It's something that we intend to bring back and take away some of the taxes on domestic gas, if possible, so that we can increase the consumption of LPG. Like I said, we would construct an additional gas processing train, which is a second gas processing plant aside the Atuabo, and achieve 100% supply and utilization of LPG for indigenous processing. And then we will review the current cylinder recirculation model. We've had discussions with you. Some of you have expressed your misgivings. We believe that the two systems can run concurrently, so that eventually, if there's the need to phase out, the market itself will determine. But people have gone for loans, people have gone for huge commercial loans from the banks, invested in the downstream sector, and all of a sudden, you want to curtail their businesses, you're going to incur huge losses, and that can impact the economy. Normally, when you are implementing such policies, you do a pilot and do a gradual roll-up, you monitor the situation, and then the industry players themselves, when they see that the system is working, you don't even need to tell them. They will quickly adjust and follow suit. And that is exactly what we intend to do in partnership with you and in collaboration with you. Like we said, we would reposition TOR and ensure that TOR processes our domestic crude and give you the necessary LCs So that instead of importing everything, you, the BDCs, can procure from TOR in collaboration with the OMCs so we can supply the system. We believe that with our domestic refinery capacity, we can meet 100% our petroleum product consumption needs. If you take Central, you take TOR, and you take the other smaller refineries, we are confident that such as Plankton, Akwaba, we can meet our domestic demand. And this is something that we intend to work with you, not just to meet domestic demand, but Ghana can become the hub for the export of petroleum products to our neighboring countries. We would create the enabling environment to incentivize private sector participation in the oil and gas sector, but more importantly, we would insist on local content and local participation. You would be the first point of call in all the policies that we implement. And where we realize that you, the local businessman, cannot, we would create the enabling environment for you to form JVs with foreign parties so that they can bring the financing, the technical expertise, the know-how, and then eventually you can benefit from that sector. We also believe that we have to restructure BOST. BOST is becoming an octopus and an amorphous animal and virtually getting into every space. BOST's core mandate is to keep strategic reserves, build infrastructure in terms of tankage and pipeline, so that it will be a vehicle for you, the BDCs and the OMCs, to function effectively and not to outcompete you. You are a cardinal factor in the oil and gas sector. And I bet you, President Mahama has assured you that we will restructure BOST. We would conduct a forensic investigation of BOST's activities. Because the reports we are getting indicates that there's massive corruption, massive underhand dealings, financial malfeasance in BOST. And let me make it clear that we will retrieve every penny, every cedi that has been misappropriated as far as BOST is concerned. And we are determined to do so. But we can only do so with your mandate. And so if you're a Ghanaian and you want to see that level of accountability, it is incumbent upon you to put your political difference aside and vote for the NDC so that we can deal with that amorphous animal called BOST. Because where BOST is headed, I can tell you, we are going to incur serious debt in the foreseeable future. The premix fuel issue is major. I come from a fishing community. And I tell you, when the fuel gets to Bupe, which is not a fishing town, all the premix vanishes in Bupe. And that's a fact. And you are living witnesses. Under the NDC, that was not the situation. The premix committees were working effectively to the extent that they made savings and they were putting up schools. Today, political apparatchiks have hijacked the whole premix system. People who are not fishermen are in charge of premix. And what it does is that it eventually finds its way into your fuel tank. And so we shall review that, put in place a live monitoring mechanism with you. When the premix is landed, you know the quantities, you can track it. With modern day technology, we should be able to know exactly where the premix landed. But like I said, we also roll out a pilot system where we would use outboard motors that are chargeable, and then eventually we can go there. Because I recall that under Honorable Boa, we used to subsidize a lot of kerosene. And the kerosene found its way into people's tanks. But when we started the cylinder recirculation model and the LPG promotion model, we took out the subsidy on kerosene and used it for the cylinder promotion, and then brought kerosene at par with diesel and petrol. And the success story is measurable, is quantifiable, and you can see for yourself that this is a policy that is working. And so those MPP party apparatchiks who have hijacked the premix system, I think this is the time for them to begin to write their handing over notes, because it will be a thing of the past. And we would bring about transparency and ensure that we deal with that. This is a sample of the outboard electronic motor. You charge it, it takes about 48 hours, no noise, low carbon, it meets energy transition needs, and it's cheaper. Because unlike the traditional outboard motor where you have to service the motor and buy fuel every day, you can even use solar to charge this, and we believe that that is the way to go. But we also believe that fuel transportation ought to be reviewed. We've received several complaints from the OMCs and even from some of you on the padding of margins on the petroleum buildup. We'll review the price buildup and make it more transparent and cut out the fat so that when it comes to the petroleum price buildup, it can be transparent, it can be efficient, and we would ensure that we deal with the challenges associated with that. We also know that we have to construct an onshore pipeline from the west to the east so that it gives us reliability, security, and reduce the cost. The West African Gas Pipeline have just indicated that they want to increase the cost of transporting fuel. And sometimes in this sector, when it comes to supply reliability, you need a second pipeline so that it gives you that flexibility and reliability. We would initiate the development of an additional mooring facility to address the current demand challenges. We have taken note that your current mooring facility is not enough. Governments are supposed to make bold decisions and to address the challenges. And even if there are challenges, we would engage all the stakeholders and address this particular challenge so that we'll have an additional mooring facility to address the supply security. And one other thing we will do is that the cash water flow mechanism would allow you to be represented on the cash water flow mechanism committee. It's not a committee that develops nuclear weapons. It's a committee that just ensures that money is collected in the sector is properly accounted for. Some of you are accountants, some of you are finance people, economists. We need you on that committee to increase the level of accountability and to ensure that we deal with the challenges. If the tanker drivers are also here, we would engage you. We do not believe that we should get directly into some of the activities, but I'm sure that with the right leadership, we can do that. We will review the NPA Act and bring it in line with current and modern tenets so that it can serve you better. In the petroleum sector, we have 4 main anchor pillars. That is 1, supply reliability. 2, to ensure that we deliver the products in a safe manner and ensure that they are delivered with the right quality and quantity. And finally, the 4th will be the issue of pricing. We want to ensure that the pricing reflects the true situation so that the consumer benefits from what we are doing. We would ensure fairness and equity in LACAN allocation. I get a lot of complaints. That's a fact. And you know, this sector, you can't cheat everybody all the time. The word kululu currently being manifested at MPA in terms of LACAN allocation will be a thing of the past because His Excellency President Mahama has indicated that we have a monthly meeting with you captains of industry. And so whoever here becomes minister or MPA boss or wherever, before you go for that monthly meeting, you should be aware that you're going to meet all these sector players before President Mahama. And it is your duty to do what is right and proper. Because unlike the current president, President Mahama would not be a clearing agent. If you miss the line and you cross the red line, you can't be sure that he will fire you. And so be rest assured that you have a president coming in who would do what is right and proper. But in collaboration with you, we want to restructure the reserve requirements that we need for this country. Because we believe that it's not just BOST that should keep the strategic reserves. We believe that with modern technology, we can work with you so that you keep a certain minimum quantum of petroleum products all the time. And if we can do that in a holistic manner, we will be serving that same strategic reserves. Strategic reserves simply means that you need a certain minimum amount of petroleum products in the country every time, so that in case of supply disruptions, you can have a buffer. In most countries, that's what they do. It's not just the state-owned entity. Yes, the state-owned entity has a role to play, but in partnership with you, we can agree on a framework that works for everybody so that we can keep the strategic reserves. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you and to assure you that we are also aware of some regulatory overlaps, and we would, together with you, and consult you when it comes to the crafting of regulation, so that that regulation would work for all of us, so all of us can live in harmony, can live in peace, and ensure that this country grows and prosper. Let me thank the CBOD. Let me thank Dr. Patrick. But with your permission, let me thank the Honorable Bua, who was my minister, has provided a lot of leadership, even though I'm the chairman, Honorable Bawa, my colleague in Parliament, and all the members of the Energy Committee, without favoring anybody. All of them have worked tirelessly. And I can tell you that our energy manifesto is a product of consultation with you. We've had a series of consultation with you. But more importantly, when it comes to the policy implementation, we shall do that hand in hand with you. We look forward to the NDC assuming office come 7th January 2025. And I tell you, we would turn things around, we'll reset this country, and put this country on a path of growth, on a path of prosperity, and more importantly, on a path of inclusive growth. Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapor, who's MP for Yape, Kusigu, and Chairman of the Energy Committee of the National Democratic Congress. He's also ranking member on the Energy and Mines, as well as the Finance Committee of Parliament. We do appreciate your very good presentation here on the petroleum industry. Let me also welcome, ladies and gentlemen, the Member of Parliament for Elembele constituency, his former Energy Minister, and also Deputy Minority Leader, the Honorable Amma Buakofi. Please put your hands together for him. I was in your constituency earlier this week, no, actually last week, and I only fell short of campaigning for you. Please, you're welcome, sir. So we're going to be shortly inviting the Honorable John Jinapor to join us here on the platform. Oh, the former Energy Minister actually has been told to join us. So please take a seat, or probably both of them will take a seat, yes. And I'll gladly join you as we take questions from our audience. We've also got, this. I must remind you that this program is also being streamed live on the CBOD page on Facebook. So kindly go on Facebook and follow the page. We've got questions coming in from our viewers as well. And so they will help us in this whole back and forth. But it's really been an interesting presentation by the Honorable John Jinapor, who served as Deputy Energy Minister, and of course the Honorable Emmanuel Kofi Bua, who was then Energy Minister under John Dramani Mahama. Today he's the Deputy Minority Leader. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. So I'll start off with you, Mr. Jinapor. Listening to you, it almost seems as if there's really nothing exciting about the NPP's management of the energy or petroleum industry. Listening to you, I had a lot of review. It almost seems as if we must have a minister of review or a Ministry of Review? How many reviews do you intend to have when you come into power?
Well, thank you. I think the records speak for itself. The facts speak for itself. And like I said, when we were leaving office, ECG was making profit, Gridco was making profit, GNPC was doing very well, oil production increasing. And so the facts are there for everybody to see. Today, the ENI has drawn down on the World Bank letter of credit. And that is serious. For the ENI to draw down the letter of credit, it means that technically we are defaulting. Car Power has also drawn down on the letter of credit $170 million. ENI, the letter of credit or partial rate guarantee, which was provided by the World Bank, MEGA, was about 500 million. Asogli has just stated that they are owed about 300 million. And when we did our computation, we're talking of about $2.5 billion to $3 billion in order to clear the pipeline. And so the energy sector is on the verge of collapse. And the truth is that President Mahama would inherit a dilapidated, run-down, almost broken-down energy sector. And that calls for a lot of effort, a lot of policy interventions, and a lot of reviews. I mean, is it not sad that our oil production has declined from 190 to 138,000? When Ghana discovered oil, everybody had hope. Today, look at where we are. Our gas infrastructure, not even 1 kilometer of gas pipeline has been added by Ghana Gas. Look at the energy sector. The debts keep mounting. And so clearly, it's not like we are doomsday sayers or prophets. But when you read the statistics, when you look at the data, it doesn't look trajectory.
It doesn't very worried. Okay, so you've talked a lot about the problems. Let's talk about the solutions. And I'll start off with you, Mr. Emmanuel Kofi Amabua. The Gold for Oil program has been one of the major positives, according to the New Patriotic Party. It's been one of their major positives. The former energy minister, Napo, was here last week to talk about their achievements for the energy ministry and what they intend to do when they win power. You have said categorically that you are going to review the Gold for Oil program. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, so let me take you back to the earlier. The reason John is able to point to the things that are wrong is that he was there. We laid the solid foundation for a petroleum sector, making sure that the policies that is needed for an uptake were all in place. We established the Petroleum Commission. We made sure that Ghanaians were in the forefront of the industry by passing local content. And today you ask every Ghanaian, don't take our word for it. Ask the people in the industry, what is the industry doing? How are they doing today? How was it when the NDC was in power, and how is it today? That's why we are able to tell you the things we are telling you. We are not speaking for ourselves. We are speaking, and we've been listening to those in the industry. There's complete corruption. And everybody knows that when you bring corruption in the upstream sector, no serious investor will stay. That's why they've left. We are able to say that, God willing, President Mahama is going to be president. And we'll tell the world that we are open for business. And we are going to be transparent, and our record is clear. The people who led the energy sector are all here. During the NDC time, are all here. And you can ask them, and ask the businessmen, were we calling you at night and telling you to come and give us anything? What we're interested in was to make sure that we're empowering Ghanaians and that the sector was stronger. We never did. And that's why we are very proud to tell you that we are very sure that we can turn things around. But on the question of Gold for Oil, the two things they said about Gold for Oil was that it's going to bring about stability of the currency. Is our currency stable today? They said that petroleum prices will stabilize. Has it been stabilized? The key benchmarks for Gold for Oil has been a complete failure. So when we say that this has to be reviewed, that's the reason. It's simple. We decided, remember that on a weekly basis we were meeting to deal with petroleum pricing. And we took a bold decision. It was not a popular decision. We took a bold decision to do what they call the, what do you call it? Deregulation is what I mean. And you know, during that period, we had to work closely with the players in the industry to bring, and deregulation has saved this country over $10 billion. Those are the things we did. Today, when the government is really coming up with a policy without consulting the players in the industry, and then continues to tell them the things that they are telling them is not correct. They are telling people the oil for gold is good. But the industry players are telling you it's a complete failure. It's not helping us. Why is it that CBOD and your players are struggling to get forex to import products? Why is it that government institutions who are established to basically support the private sector to grow, like the MPA, like BOST, are now somehow colluding to collapse private sector? Is that what government is supposed to do?
And so
government is supposed to establish institutions that will strengthen private sector to grow. That's all we are supposed to do.
So
and
gold,
that is
for
what
oil, gold for oil is going to be jettisoned.
We have to review it and make sure that it's
No,
aligns.
I need to get that clear. Are you jettisoning it or you are reviewing it?
I think John was very clear.
John, what are you
he
doing
said.
about it?
We are not going to continue with the gold for oil
Period.
program.
A complete jettison.
We are going to take it out,
Because it's a failure.
sit with you, and replace it with a workable solution and ensure that the forex is available for you.
Tell me about that workable solution. How are you going to ensure forex, the availability of forex on the market?
First of all, that gold you sell gives you forex. That forex should be escrowed. First thing, the forex should be escrowed. It's about prioritization. If you think that fuel is a major issue and you want to prioritize it, you will do that. But alongside, we are saying that we want to bring on board our refineries. When we bring on board our refineries finally, it means that importation of finished products will go down drastically. As importation of finished products go down drastically, you are adding value to your indigenous crude oil.
But John, you're making it
And
sound
that
that
is something
simplistic.
because we've done it before. And I
Refineries?
have given you an example.
You're gonna bring back Tor?
Let me give you one
Will
example.
that be that
Tor.
simple?
Yes, Tor, and Honorable Boy, we give Tor 2 million barrels of oil from the 10 fields to process. They commenced the process. That quantity had not finished when we left office. Immediately, the Akufo-Addo government assumed office. They described that crude oil as off-spec and sold it to a company that was not even registered. That is the level of corruption and impunity we are talking about. Look, we've done it before, and the record is there. You are here. Compare our track record with that of the MPP and be objective and fair, and you can come to no other solution or conclusion that the NDC has a better track record than the MPP.
Let me add something. The
Please do.
MPP has failed in all aspects. Remember, when we were leaving office, we had 3 active producing fields. The fourth field we were about to produce was, at the time, it was a Hess field. Hess was ready when Cote d'Ivoire brought this issue, and we went to arbitration. So during those periods, Hess decided that they would back out. And that's why Ake came in. We call those fields low-hanging fruits. We had already finished everything. 8 years later, these people have given these guys all the sweetness, and today, these same partners have concluded that these guys are not credible enough that we can come and invest and produce this field. Do you know the reason why the Ake field, we now call it what? It's hanging. It's hanging because of this failure of this government. They were fighting over who should be given the contract to do FPSC. They were fighting left and right over contract, and all of a sudden, the companies were like, we can't trust these people. I'm just simply telling you that if you bring this kind of group of people to manage the upstream sector or the energy sector, this is what you get.
Let's stay on the upstream sector and all the challenges that you're talking about. I'm interested in knowing how you're going to deal with the issue of unitization between ENI and Springfield, the matter that was recently arbitrated at the courts. in
Yes.
Hague, right.
First of all, you start with an attitude, with an open mind, to be sure that what is the standard practice? What are the right things that must be done? And you make sure that the right things are what is done and what the law must be followed. I mean, in this particular case, Springfield is a Ghanaian company. But if Springfield is wrong, we are not going to side with Springfield because they are a Ghanaian company. We are going to make sure that the right things are what is going to be supported, to make sure that the world and every investor who is ready to come to Ghana will conclude that in Ghana, the rule of law is what we follow, and that we follow the procedures and the right things that are done in the oil industry. We don't create our own processes as a Ghanaian processes that are completely out of whack with the world. And so, in this particular case, what needs to be done is what to be done. The right things that need to be done. And it starts with an attitude of a government that will say that, E&I, we need you. We know you are a very important, big player. You are critical in our energy sector. And whatever it is, let's sit down first. But you don't start throwing jabs and throwing tantrums. Do you know the stories we hear about this? Can I tell you a story about Car Power?
Go ahead.
Car Power is old money. They've called on guarantee. And guess what? They've been calling and they can't get any government official to talk to. They go to the Ministry of Finance. And I'm sorry to say this. The first they say that, oh, you are Car Power, you've called on the guarantee, we won't meet you. Excuse me. Are you there because of your egos or you are representing the people of Ghana? Do you know the consequences of Car Power shutting down that plant? Its implication for businesses. Today we saw Sonia Sogli shutting down. Do you know the implications to businesses in Ghana? Do you know the implications to job creation? And so we are saying that if people are going to take positions to represent the people of Ghana, they must understand that you have to work in humility and understand that you are working for the people of Ghana. And your egos must be put aside. Maybe when you finish that job, that serious public office, you can do that. But there are consequences for the things that has happened. The reason we are where we are is that this bunch of people who have led us have really driven our country into a place that we can't describe.
Right. I'll come back to you. I see
Just
John is itching to have a bite of the issue of unitization.
The first thing about governance is that you are there to resolve challenges. If there were no challenges in the system, Ghanaians would not decide they want to go and vote for leaders. It's because all of us cannot sit around the table. That's why they vote for leaders. And the first issue is dialogue. So Springfield, E&I, if government takes an independent, impartial position and begins to engage them, they are also business people. As they keep arbitration or being in court or litigating, they are also losing. And their shareholders are worried. So the first thing we intend to do is His Excellency President Mahama will send a signal. We are ready to work with both parties. Let's sit around the table. What must we do? And when we dialogue, look, sometimes you'll be surprised that some of the solutions we get emanate from you people and not from us. But if you decide that you take an intransigent position, a belligerent position, and that you will not engage, this kind of embarrassment is what we are going to witness. And so, as for the Springfield E&I, President Mahama has been clear. He's been unambiguous. We will dialogue. We will discuss the issues, chart a roadmap. If we need to do an appraisal, we'll do it. If we need to do an evaluation, we do it so that we know what is in each block. And then, based on apportionment, we can then decide how you apportion whatever resources come out of there. And it's standard practice. It's not rocket science. We can easily do that. One other one to deal with the challenge is ECG itself. We've stated unequivocally that we want to involve the private sector in the concession. In our first 120 days, we want to do it in a transparent manner, not to sit in somebody's office and structure it and impose it on Ghanaians. You Ghanaians will be at the forefront. If you need technical hands from outside, do that. If we can reduce the ECG losses to just 8%.
And are you talking about management of ECG?
We're talking of the billing and collection in particular. That is where the Achilles heel is. Billing, collection. ECG staff.
So you want to bring in a private investor to manage that?
To deal with the billing and collection. ECG will be up there. It's a concession. You sign KPIs with them. It's measurable. You can monitor. And even through boundary metering, we know that, for instance, East Legon, this amount of kilowatt of power was supplied at the end of the month. The SCADA system will tell you it's for a private sector. He collects, he has a percentage, the rest comes into the cash water flow mechanism. You are on that board, the apportionment is done, it is tidier, it is neater, it is transparent, and resolve the solutions. Simple as that.
And the reason this is so important is because we have all come to the conclusion that in the energy sector, especially in the power sector, the only way that the power sector thrives is that the guy at the value chain, at the very end of the value chain, must be efficient enough to collect the money to pay everybody else. And so the reason why everybody is struggling is ECG. And again, John has mentioned it, but that's why we go back to why we are at pains right now. I mean, if you go and we had diagnosed the problem. Look, after we addressed all the issues, we knew that the distribution sector must be the key player. And so that's why we focused on the distribution sector, to strengthen ECG and to make sure that that small aspect, which is the collection of the money, we know that private sector can do it better. So we're working with that. We are not selling ECG as a company, but we are basically making sure we bring private sector players who are effective at collecting money. Today, let me tell you, on Saturday morning, when everybody is home, that's when DSTV will disconnect your cable. And then everybody is running in line to go and pay it. There are systems that we can put in place to make sure that people will pay their electricity bill without stealing it. Pay the electricity bill quickly. That's how we pay every power producer. Unfortunately, what happened? When this process started, unfortunately, we left. And the story has been told many times. These guys who came for the private sector participation, the reason why this happened is because overnight, this same government cooked up a company within 1 week to become their Ghanaian local partner. They are supposed to come with 500 million. They say, well, the Ghanaian partner came with nothing, so we too, we didn't come with nothing. And before we know it, what happened? PDS scandal. And even up to today, nobody even know how much PDS has taken away from us. How much they collected, nobody has audited that money today. And the U.S. government, out of anger, took their 190 million away. And so that's why that process ended. So don't let us kid ourselves about where we've been. Every time we go back to it, there's a reason why we are saying that this government has not really treated the people of Ghana well.
Right. Let me remind you that you're still watching or listening to the Energy Town Hall Forum organized by the Ghana Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors. Last week we had the turn of the New Patriotic Party. Of course, you know, the running mate, Dr. Matthew Opoku-Pompe, was here to answer questions on the petroleum and energy sector and what they intend to do when the wind power come 2025. Today is the turn of the National Democratic Congress, and we have here the Honorable John Jinapor, who is with the Energy Committee of Parliament, seated right here with us, and of course the Honorable Emmanuel Ama Kofi Boa, who is MP for Lembele and also Deputy Minority Leader. If you're watching from home, we encourage you to send in your questions. We're streaming live on the CBOD platform on Facebook. We've also got a number of representatives from civil society gathered here today. Let me acknowledge the presence of the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy, Benjamin Boach. He's just joined us. Ben, good to have you on the program. Also, if you're seated right here and you want to ask a question, kindly raise up your hands. I'll acknowledge you, and then you get up to ask your question. Before we give the microphone to those inside, I've got a question for you. Many people within the industry are asking, and I've got to ask you, what are you going to do about the boss margin? Is it still relevant today?
First of all, we think that we should escrow the boss margin. The boss margin ought to be used, 1, for infrastructure, 2, for the pipelines, and if need be, the strategic reserves. But boss should be put in a situation where eventually you can win them off the boss margin. Because every company, as it makes profit and plows back the returns, it increases in size, and based on efficiency, can
So you're saying that although BOST is itself, competing, commercialized, and it's competing to the market, the private company should continue to pay to BOST until such a time that we can win them of the margin.
the BOST margin is not paid by the private companies.
Okay.
The BOST margin eventually is paid by the end user. And that is supposed to be for an insurance or a security. And also to ensure that that state-owned entity puts in place that infrastructure for you, the private sector, to be able
But
to
a lot
thrive.
of these private entities have
So
their own
for
tanks,
instance,
don't they?
maybe the private sector will not be interested in laying a pipeline to say Boko. The private sector may not be interested in putting a tank in, say, Zuarungu. BOST, based on this social contract, ought to do that, make it more attractive so that the private sector will take over. So our point is that as they achieve their mandate, we should be able to get to a level where you would not need that BOST margin. Because as they provide that infrastructure, you, the private sector, as you use that infrastructure, you also pay something. Through efficiency and effective management, BOST can be positioned in a way where they can become vibrant, turn themselves around, without necessarily depending on the BOST
So this is
margin.
not a cost that you're going to take away anytime soon.
We would systematically take it away. What we won't do here is that because you want political power, you just promise what you will not do in your first year. Because like I told you, the rot at BOST is so much that it will take some time to put it on a sound footing. But we believe that the BOST margin eventually must give way. That is our strong belief.
Any questions from the... Let me give the microphone to Ben. I'm sure he would want to say something. Please, kindly pass on the microphone to Benjamin Boache, the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Say again? Ben has gone past. Kindly give the microphone to Ben. The Honorable Ibaro Ababua wants to place an injunction on Ben. Yes.
Okay, so my name is Michael Craig Afo. I'm the editor for EnergyNewsAfrica.com, and I have three questions. One, first of all, has to do with the power sector. I have read through the NDC's manifesto, and then I realized that there's no indication of how much of power or how much of megawatts of power do you want to probably procure or introduce for the 4-year term in case you win the election next year. Also, Honorable Jinapo indicated that there was too much corruption or rot in BOST. Exactly what is he talking about? Are there the financial malfeasances that he spoke about? Are there contract inflation of contract, or people are just there siphoning money for their personal aggrandizement or whatever? Then coming to the upstream sector, in the face of energy transition where especially IOCs, that's the international oil companies, are re-strategizing or reviewing their policies, how is NDC going to ensure that you attract these IOCs, especially those that exited the country, and even attract new ones? And what level of production for the 4-year period, in case you win, are you going to ensure that we increase our oil production too? Thank you.
Right, kindly bring the microphone forward here. Okay, just take the question first.
I think that the first one, John will take that. The first one was, one of the things you don't do is that you don't just simply say that I'm going to produce 2,000 megawatts. It has to be really planned. It has to be strategic. It has to really, you have to have an energy focus that is really in line with the demand for power on an annual basis. And I think in Ghana, we already have that partner. The Energy Commission has always been the institution guiding government in terms of our energy requirement. I think we've said it very clearly that the Energy Commission, working with government, will make sure that we don't sleep on the annual demand for power and making sure that we don't wait for 10 years. I've said that the reason why when President Mahama became president, we saw this crisis, especially the energy shortfall, was because if you looked at the history, every time we've done intervention, the only time we do intervention is when we have crisis. And so we're not really planning and adding systematically on an annual basis. But that's exactly what we've said. We'll be making sure that we match annual demand with the power addition that is required on an annual basis so that we don't get ourselves in the situation we get ourselves into. And so I think that has already been stated. But John will add. The second thing you talked about was the petroleum sector. Is that, what was the issue? Yes, and I'm saying that the only way you really get, we are saying that there's a shortfall of 30%. How do you get these investors to come? The only way you get them to come is first, you create a very conducive atmosphere that will tell every investor that Ghana is the right place to do business. And you do that by making sure that you yourself, as a country, you are doing the right things. Making sure the rule of law is at the top. Making sure that companies that are already here are the ones that are speaking for you. Making sure that, for example, ENI and other companies that are investing here are really being treated well, or there's a sense that there's a fair play. That's exactly what we will do. That is the starting point. Once you do that, and making sure that this sense of corruption at high places is gone, those are the things that will fundamentally begin to attract investment. And we believe that that's what we will start doing.
Well, I think Honorable Boy is there with the generation issue. We want to match generation in a systematic and orderly by doing the right forecasting and projections. Aware of the energy transition. And this is why we are determined to pump as much oil as we can whilst promoting renewable energies. And if you were here earlier, we talked about our energy transition plan, the use of electric vehicles, solar panels on homes, increasing renewable energy, providing the right incentives for electric vehicles, and we also talked about the solar-powered outboard motors, and moving away from fossil fuels in a phased-out manner. But we also believe that gas will have a role to play for some time to come. And so gas, which is low-carbon fuel, is something that we really want to anchor whilst we transition. Because the thing about energy transition, you must also factor in the cost so that you don't disrupt your economic architecture. On the issue of corruption, why was the energy minister sacked? The Ameri deal, we all here. We all witnessed what was happened. GPGC, why did they take that decision? Wasn't it because of a family feud between the president's own family members? You have your own quarrels because your wife has an issue with another person. Why must Ghanaians pay 170 million because the president's family, they have their own feud? And they extend it and unilaterally decide that they will cancel the contract, even against expert advice. I mean, this is clear, it's obvious. I'm not saying it is out there. And so these are evidence that manifest. The PDS scandal, they said they swindled them. Who are those behind the PDS? Who are those writing those letters, changing the shareholding structure and appointing directors? We know them. I mean, this state capture is real. And so, Ameri, but for ASAP and minority, they would have swindled us. And so clearly, the evidence abounds. And when we assume office, a lot more will be on earth. It's because they are in power. What probably we are revealing is a tip of the iceberg. I'm sure that when we jettison them out and we assume the full reins, finally the bust margin, and we do the research together. My colleague Honorable Bawa just drew my attention that the bust margin has been collateralized. And so when it comes to taking it out, then you need a replacement. And it's something that all of us have to brainstorm, especially when you've collateralized, and we have indicated that we wouldn't take their step by abrogating and canceling legally binding contracts. And so this is where they've put us, and that's why we said that eventually we should be able to get to that milestone. Thank you.
Ben, you have the microphone?
Yes.
We'll come back to you, please.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you. I will come back to you. You asked 3 questions, please. I'll come back to you.
Right, thank you for the ambush, and thank you, Honorables, for availing yourselves for questions. I mean, the work we do is a genuine worry how the energy sector has actually become perhaps the biggest problem. I mean, there are 2 problems in Ghana that, for me, are actually destroying our nation, and one is the energy sector, and the other is galamsey. And the energy sector, recently I've called it as, a galamsey on our economy. Because you cannot have a sector taking over 1 billion cedis. No, the budget even predicts about 2 billion cedis a month. I mean, we don't invest that much in education. We don't invest that much on health infrastructure. We don't invest that much on gender, social protection, and the rest of it. So it's a huge problem. So what I'm hoping to hear in this election is a plan to deal aggressively with this cash-strapped situation. Take it or leave it. January 2025, we will see, how much we owe the IPPs. We have to deal with it. As ugly as threat, it won't end today, because it's going to build up. ECG cannot collect. It's a reality. We owe ENI today $450 million has been drawn down on the LCs with stand chart. We only luck that the World Bank guarantee hasn't been called upon. If that continues, we may see World Bank guarantee called upon, which would put Ghana second to Argentina. That ever. So these are real threats that we want to see what plans are for to deal with this situation come 2025, so that we can aggressively deal with it. Otherwise, the energy sector continues to strangle the economy, and we are not getting the investments that we need in our people. On the downstream side, I mean, we talk about these margins, busts. We seem to be dancing around what we will do with those margins. But the reality of that, all those margins, none of them have economic justification for them. The only political justification, we need to move product from one point to the other and make sure there's uniform pricing. And then we are paying 90 pesos for a liter to move from Tema to your tank. All right? Cumulatively, when you fill your tank, you're paying over 120 cedis on just transportation. There's no economic justification. Nobody can tell you why it should cost you that much for you to pay for UPPF. Bust margin. 21st century, we are still afraid that somebody will hold Ghana to ransom. We need to stockpile. That has never happened. And yet, we keep paying this margin for strategic stock. PDM, we move depot to depot before it is moved to your tank. There is zonalization. A whole lot of confusion just to take more money from the people. Cumulatively, the public is paying 6 billion plus that we can't clearly account for economically. So we need to have clear direction on how we deregulate the sector and allow the regulators to regulate the industry rather than becoming businessmen, because you have MPA that has so many margins they are managing. So they are even managing cash more than regulation. All right? And that's why you see this kind of bad fuels in tanks, and they are dispensed. And recently, we're talking about shortchanging at some pumps where they are not dispensing the right quantities. Those are regulatory issues that have to be paid attention to, not margins and focusing on margins and increasing margins every day. So we need clarity on how we deal with these things so that we can properly enforce regulation and allow the consumer to have the quality of products that we actually deserve on the market. On the upstream side, I mean, there hasn't been investment. We need to bring investment if we have to take the oil industry seriously. And things as basic as unitization done across the world, many examples, we've not been able to deal with it, all right, to let it happen. So there has to be clarity of policy on how do we deal with it. We will set up A, B, C, D to make sure that going forward, this is the process for unitization in Ghana. X, Y, Z to make sure that we are not limiting or reducing these things to emotions and people's appetite and what they want to do at any particular time. But there are laid down rules that assures the investor that we won't go down that route again. So those assurances are really
Ben,
important.
this thing about
unitization,
unitization, the laws are there, aren't they?
Yeah, just a quick one.
Yeah.
Ben, laws are meant for human beings. No matter the laws you put in place, if those at the helm of affairs have their personal interests, they would attempt to circumvent the law. PDS, we had worked out the structure. A new government assumes office, and they decide that they will jettison what they made. They want to do something new. And they convince us that, no, we now want a Ghanaian company to have a majority share, whilst telling us that they were forming another company and distributing the shareholding. So I agree with you. You need some laid down structures, but you also need committed people who are determined to follow through. Unitization, the laws are there. You must do an appraisal and determine what are the potentials in each field. You won't do that. You decide that unilaterally you write a letter and give directives. It is taken up there and quashed. So I get your point. But I'm saying that as leaders, we have fiduciary duties. How come these things were not happening under Honorable Boa? Is it that the laws were there and now the laws are not there? What has changed? So I get your point, and you've been a champion in this sector. We cannot know it all. And that's also one thing we must know as leaders, that we are not oases of knowledge, and that we cannot be an island. Sometimes when we engage you, we get solutions. And so we take some of these engagements seriously. When we go back, we retreat and play back some of your comments and brief the flag bearer, and that forms part of our policy decisions. So let me thank you, but let me assure you that, look, the two of us are not the same. And I hear people say, we, it is true, it's Ghana. But the we, they are decision makers there.
Now, let me say something about what Ben said. And I think it's important, the point that has been made. See, the difference between the NDC and the MPP is that, Ben, when I was the energy minister and I was trying to pass a petroleum law, I had all these banters with your outfit. But those were banters that we never viewed, because you were raising all these issues, that you were my enemy. You brought a proposal. At some point, we took the law to Parliament and we withdrew it because after we had engaged you, felt some of the issues you brought were important. That's how you govern. That's the difference between the NDC and the MPP. There were issues on local content, if you remember, where the whole diplomatic world said that we cannot pass local content law. It was too early. It would drive up. We did a presentation to the CSOs, and we were able to convince you. And on that particular score, you were with us against every big diplomatic world. Well, the score came out. Ghanaians got a foot in the industry because of that. And I'm saying that the difference between us and the MPP is that those times when you were raising all those alarms, you probably would have gotten a knock at your door at night. But we didn't do that because we thought that this was in the interest of the country.
You are suggesting he's having knocks at his door today?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying that when people critique government, they don't do that because they hate government. They do that because government must understand that their citizens always want the best for the country. And so this criticism must be taken in good faith. And government must have an open mind and always listen to the citizenry.
Good point.
Just a beg you, just one point. Ben talked about the debt. The first thing, Ben, is that the energy sector does not work in isolation. So if the debt is $1 billion, and assuming the exchange rate is 1:1, that's 1 billion cedis. If this government decides that they will throw away the Public Financial Management Act and print 74 billion from the Bank of Ghana and dump it into this economy, it immediately spikes the inflation and the exchange rate. So some of the debt you are seeing is not even directly because of consumption as to 1:1, but because of a bad economic management decision under Dr. Baumia. You are seeing a debt which was 1 billion suddenly become like 1.5 billion. And it's something that I think that all of us ought to pay attention to. You can't eat your cake and have it. We came out with energy sector levies, 40 billion. Probably you came a little bit late. We showed it. X amount of it has been borrowed for pensions. The energy sector levies was passed for a specific reason, but they've decided that they'll misapply it. And so these are some of the things that, look, we clearly need to hold leadership accountable. And you have done your part, but all of us Ghanaians, sometimes we need to put our political differences aside and call a spade and not a desert spoon.
Right. I need you to talk about the export price of petroleum products and what you're going to do about it. We know the exchange rate fluctuations account primarily for the cost of fuel, diesel, LPG. Taxes also, we know, are very, very high. Now, what are you going to do, first of all, to ensure stability in the city and also in the cost of export prices? We know this government has come up with the gold for oil, gold for coin, gold for reserves. What are you going to do? Okay. Right. Oh, sure. Right.
Taxes on fuel. One of the taxes I've always had an issue with is the stabilization recovery levy. Price stabilization. If you look at it critically, it should have played a role in giving us some cushioning. In the end, we only talk about using that to finance only. Yeah. But when you went to Parliament to ask for stabilization, the price deregulation completely, and the thinking have a buffer that fall on when times were hard. We've increased the stabilization from 3 to 6 to 9 to 14 and 16. If you look at the amount we generate for stabilization alone, monthly, 700 million. Yes. 700 million. And yet, we only think that premix is the only thing Ghanaians need. So I was asking if the person doesn't eat fish, the trotro driver doesn't eat fish the whole week. He's paying for a fishing expedition that ends up in a party chairman's pocket because the premix doesn't even. I'm pointing at you, don't worry. You know, so the money is just mismanaged, and just like Ben said, we give them names. There's no, accounting justification. I would be happy that some of these margins, and of course, I was happy you mentioned that you would do away with the gold for oil because almost all of us sitting here have raised issues with the gold for oil program at one point. If you could do away with that and replace that with some of the margins on fuel, segmenting them towards a buffer. Chief, I would be very happy to go to sleep knowing that you are working, and tomorrow when Israel attacks Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran and fuel prices jump, locally there will be something that you can use to cushion all of us. So we want to hear a bit of clarity on that one.
Right. Thank you.
John will come in, but let me, as somebody who has a, when I became energy minister, one of the things were some subsidies, and we'll talk about them as subsidies like kerosene. We were paying 40 million every year. And every time you want to touch that subsidy, hey, you see the whole world. Hey, you can't do this. This is serious. You collapse this. One day, John, if you recall, we came out with this thing that, okay, so the subsidy itself is supposed to go for the poor farmer in the village. They were not getting even the kerosene. Businessmen were buying the kerosene, mixing it with diesel, and destroying people's car. So we came out with a program that, okay, if it's satisfying the villager, then we'll give them the LPG, the stoves. We'll give them, no, it was the light, the solar lamps. That's how I came out with a solar lamp. That will give them the solar lamp and send it to the villages. And so when I took the proposal for taking the subsidy, I had a solution. That's how we drew that. And we even took a lot of these subsidies that were there that were not really was meant for the ordinary person, but the ordinary people were not getting the benefit. And so I say that to tell you that we have done that before. And so I think we can tell you that President Mahama is not afraid to review all these things you've talked about and to make sure that they make sense. If it doesn't make sense, he will really take care, remove them.
Right. John, so on the stability of the city, petrol pricing as well.
Yeah, on the specifics of premise fuel, we stated here that we'll take 30% and do a pilot project with solar or rechargeable outboard motors.
Oh, you mean you're going to review the subsidies on premix?
What we are saying is that instead of pushing all that money into premise which doesn't get to the consumer, start applying that money to outboard motors that are electric. So there will be no need for premise fuel. Energy transition, carbon issues, then you would phase out this middleman.
So it's going to be a gradual...
So eventually, like within 1 year, you can phase out premix. Because the premix is for outboard motors. So if you have electric outboard motors that are chargeable and can last for 48 hours, you wouldn't need that premise like Honorable Board.
Subsidies are not really benefiting the people who are supposed to benefit.
But that is the solution. The solution is to take away the need for that premix. Like he's saying, people are consuming kerosene. It doesn't get to the end user. Give them solar lamps. There's no need for kerosene. So you don't have to subsidize again. We are saying that the previous fuel should get into outboard motors. It's not getting there. Solve it by, first of all, giving the outboard motors that do not require that premix. So there will be no justification from premix in the first instance. And I think this is practical, this is hands-on, and other countries have done it. So we should be able to do it. And it will create more jobs for people. And that even brings some money based on this cap and trade issues with environmental issues. So that is our solution. The stability of the cocoa, which used to give us the currency, is reduced by about 50%. The oil sector, which used to give you the dollar, has declined by 32%. And so President Mahama gave an address at Movenpick, the other hotel, Kempinski, where he rolled out how to deal with the currency. If you deal with the currency, it means that you are dealing with the currency influenced price in terms of petroleum products. The other issue is the efficiency that Ben and Co have been talking about. And I concede that we do not know everything. And I'm hearing some very interesting things today that we want to engage in further. If you take out the UPPF, how then do you ensure that the petrol is landed at a uniform price? We must have that solution, and we engage each other. We cannot know it all. We will deal with that. You get a point. Right. But if you refocus BOST, you also reduce even the excessive need for the BOST margin. Right. So these are practical solutions that we think we can roll out.
Duncan and I will find out about the taxes on petroleum, of course, on LPG, the rest, the two others. And then also, whether or not you're going to use the stabilization and recovery levy to cushion consumers in the event of a jump in world market prices.
So the price stabilization and recovery levy ought to account a certain amount. I think it's 70-30%. I'll check the apportionment. So first of all, the question is, how much have you accrued? Is the amount that can determine the level of cushioning. The other one too has to do with even the reserves you have. Because sometimes if you manage your reserves well and do a proper negotiation, when prices go up and you have enough reserve, and that's what the US does, they pump more in times of difficulty and store more when prices are low. If you get it right, that can also give you a certain minimum level of cushioning. So these are the two things that I think that we can look at. And when we look at that, we can ensure that there's some predictable level. But mostly in Ghana, the price is mostly currency driven. Exchange rate plays a key role. And if you can tackle that portion, I'm telling you the burden will be much, much less. Because the windows, as they go up and down, in terms of pricing, if you do a proper trajectory, you see that they even out. And with a proper mechanism, you can hold the price. People are not saying that you shouldn't have a little bit of increment, and I was misquoted, or a little bit of reduction. But the spikes, it disrupts businesses. And so what governments do is to even out the spikes. And so we would ensure that we abide by the law. Currently, this government doesn't abide by the law. They use the money anyhow and engage you, the industry players. And I'm sure we'll find solutions to some of these challenges.
I don't know which one of you will take this question. I need a definite response to the decision or the way forward on the Seoul Marine facility. Is it your contention that you are going to break that monopoly?
We believe that we need a second Marine facility. It's non-negotiable. Ghana is a sovereign nation. We have a contractual agreement with PDMSA. We'll engage them first. We'll sit with them, look at the pros and cons, and take the right decision. I think that it is in their own interest, especially when the mooring facility is overburdened, especially when there are certain milestones they themselves. I'm aware, we've sent a caution. And I've sent a caution that, look, and President Mama himself has said it, we would not honor that kind of extension. It must come to Parliament first of all, because that agreement went to Parliament. So you cannot extend it without parliamentary approval. And we have stated clearly that in Parliament, we will not support that. They attempted that with VRA under the leadership of Honorable Boyenko. We've blocked it. They've told us they withdraw it. And that's some of the power we get in Parliament. So that will not happen. But when you have a will and you are determined and you engage, you will have a way forward. And we intend to do that.
On that second mooring, the participation of the private sector players will be very critical.
All right, thank you. A quick announcement. Viewers on Facebook. This one says, are there any plans to build the road from Valco Runabout to the tank farms in Tema? And then, who pays the private sector to hold the strategic reserve? Will foreign investors be potentially involved? And what's happened to ESLA and what can be done to improve it?
I think that road is very critical. Every time you pass through there, you look at the very critical industries there. It has to be done. And I'm sure that we had a forum where that question was posed to President Mahama. I'm sure he will prioritize that.
No, but more importantly, there's a road fund component in the Energy Sector Levies Act. There's a road fund component. And that is the chunk. That's the biggest of the amount. About 4 billion or 3 billion, if my memory serves me right. And so you are taking that money on the petroleum products that people consume. And I think the first priority should be to do the petroleum roads. But if you recall, because of the capping and realignment, when the money accrues, they cap it, and they took as much as 2 billion from that amount and used it for non-energy or road-related projects. We'll realign that and ensure that we use that money for the intended purpose. The thing about taxation, people are averse to taxation, but when they see that the tax revenues are used for their intended purpose, and you ask for an upward adjustment, human beings are rational. They are human beings, especially when they see the benefits. I think they'll be willing to pay. So for me, that is the way forward. There's already a revenue stream. Make use of it. Do that. And when you come to them, industry players, and say, look, because of this road, your cost is reduced, maintenance is reduced, and so let's do something. I'm not sure that you people are irrational.
You want to take the second side of the question about who pays the private sector to hold the strategic reserve? Will foreign investors be potentially involved? And what's happened to ESLA and what can be done to improve it?
For me, you don't need to even do a charge. Let's assume that you have 10 BDCs. They must make profit. And inventory management, if you've done a bit of inventory management, tells you that at least maintain a certain stock each time. And I'm saying that based on goodwill, if we engage each other, we can agree that each BDC or entity should at least keep a certain minimum as part of our national requirement, which is also allowable within the sector. And it's seamless. You don't need to go and say that keep, say, 100,000 when you know that their capacity can keep a minimum. And there's always a minimum threshold. I'm sure when we do that, then it can feed into the strategic reserve and it will address the issue. So I don't see where this issue of payment comes in at all.
Did I hear you say you're going to review the cylinder recirculation program?
Absolutely.
What are you going to do?
We think that the rush in implementing it, you can run the two models concurrently. If you attempt to shut down the current system, the cost element is quite huge. And when you implement a policy, no matter how good it is, it must not dislocate the industry. We can run it. If all of you see that it's efficient, it's working, we would not need to tell you to move in that direction. I recall when we were moving from cassettes to CDs, people were complaining. But when you see CDs working, they moved in. When you see pen drive working, they move in. When you see cloud working, they move in. But I'm saying that when you are implementing a policy, face it out, measure the system, observe the system, and make it more attractive. Because that sector, the energy sector, is capital intensive. And when you are taking policy decisions, you ought to weigh the other side of it. And that's what we intend to do. Thank you.
I'm going to give the floor the final bite of questions. But before that, Mr. Boyd, maybe you'd like to take this. I've heard what you intend to do with BOST and what you possibly intend to do with the NPA. I haven't heard what you intend to do with GNPC and Ghana Gas. GNPC, for instance, over the years has not produced a single oil. They continue to engage in a lot of corporate social responsibility programs, just like Ghana Gas. What do you intend to do with them?
I think it's a very important question. GNPC must be looked at again. The National Oil Company's goal was to basically lead Ghana into discovering oil instead of all these foreign companies coming in. Exactly where are they now in terms of that goal? As GNPC built its capacity to the extent that we can now say that instead of giving this oil block to here now, others, GNPC just go and take it and develop it. So Ghana, instead of getting 10%, 50% here, can now say that our national oil company is the one leading the charge, so this oil that we are producing is ours 100%. That is really the challenge for us. Unfortunately, GNPC has not been focusing on that core mandate. And so we are going to make sure that GNPC focuses on its core mandate. All sorts of activities. And now when you see them doing a presentation, one of the things they talk is their corporate achievements. Having built and produced water here and there, that's great. But that is not why we are giving GNPC a chunk of the oil money from Parliament. In fact, what we are going to do is to review the allocations of the money that we are giving them through the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to make sure we can really focus their attention in building the capacity to make sure that GNPC will lead us in discovering oil. I think that's very critical, and we'll do that.
But Ghana Gas. Ghana Gas is turned into an astroturf. No, it's true. Do you know the number of astroturfs they've built? I mean, Ghana Gas. They've built more astroturfs than the Ministry of Sports, than the Ghana Sports Authority. And yet they've added nothing to the infrastructure. Somebody should tell them that is not your core mandate. Your core mandate is not in expertise in building astroturfs. I mean, look, Chief, this sector, the other day I met Napo, and I told him, so how do you feel about your record? Upstream sector, downstream, the power sector, refinery. He is in arms with virtually everybody before he left. That's a fact. You check. He was in arms with virtually everybody. He knows everything. He won't take any advice. And look at where they've led us into this ditch. And it's going to take a lot of effort to pull us out of this ditch. Even our reputation out there is in tatters. So, look, we are not the same. And I disagree that we are the same. We are not the same. And we cannot be the same with this attitude. No.
We can be the same. You know, he's talked about Ghana Gas. But if you want to really see the Ghana Gas scorecard, look at, you build a pipeline, and we call it the first phase of the gas project. We send a pipeline 110 kilometers to Takoradi to Abuazi, and then 60-something kilometers to Pristia. The whole idea was to make sure that Ghana Gas will continue that process. Today, they are sitting down whining. A private sector has 300 kilometers, and you are stuck with your 100 and something kilometers. I mean, you ask the question, so in the last 8 years, what has happened? They've not added 1 kilometer of pipeline. You have not even done anything. All you've been doing is fighting for the tender of the second phase plant for 8. This one say Kojo will have it. No, I won't let it. I'll add Kojo. I'll add Ama. And they are fighting on the tender and contract who should get it for 8 years. And in the meantime, a private sector has taken over. And you are sitting down whining.
And
that is the level.
And that brings me to the second phase of the gas projects. What are you going to do about it? And where are you going to get the gas from, really?
The Jubilee partners, we've engaged Tallow. We are assured that the minimum of 100 SCF is available with the potential of ramping up. But you must give them some incentives. Even ENI, we are confident. Maybe I shouldn't even be putting this up. But anyway, this government is just about leaving office. So we can say that. ENI.
You're confident of that?
It's a fact. I mean, every rational Ghanaian should. So we've engaged ENI, and we are confident that ENI can also do something. We believe that in the first 6 months, we can get some incremental gas to plug in the shortfall. The second phase, we believe that there's too much pattern on it. And I think that I'm not a prophet of doom, but I'll be surprised if the second phase garners any momentum before we assume office. And so, I may put this out. I told Dr. Asante that I thought that the structure was not proper and that there should be some condition clauses such that maybe in the first 3-6 months, if you don't meet certain milestones, Ghana reserves the right to terminate. That is what you do in contracting. You just don't make it an open-ended contract. And so on assumption of office, would engage all these players. We've also engaged the IMF. That look, we're spending about $480 million to procure light crude oil. So even the IMF conditionalities, when the project is critical and it will reduce the cost and the foreign cost, they should give us that leeway so that we use government's guarantee and government's power to bring down the cost of financing. Because in a country, the financing is such that no entity can be rated above the country. So sometimes, like the gas infrastructure, when you use the country's sovereign power to get involved, the cost of financing comes down. And that is normally the pass-through which determines the landed cost of gas. On the back of the envelope, when I check the current one, we're doing about $9 per MMBTU. And if you commingle it with the current gas, it means that your landed electricity price is going to go up. And I'm very worried about that. So we've looked at all the scenarios. We've done some sensitivity analysis. And we believe that when we consult and engage each other, we can find an amicable solution and bring on board a second train at a much cheaper cost.
Okay, final question for me, and then I give the audience a final question. The report about, a decline in crude oil production. What really are you going to do about it? And then, Mr. Jinapo, you can take this final one. The reason we're here is because of CBOD, and they have complained that the amount of dollars available to them from the Bank of Ghana has consistently been declining. It's woefully inadequate. What are you going to do to increase the quantum of dollars available to the BDCs?
I think we've talked about why we are where we are. We are where we are because we basically have not sent the right signals for the right investors to come. Even those who came into the country were basically driven away. And we've talked about that. Everybody knows why ExxonMobil left. They left because they felt that they were pushing them into an act of corruption that was going to mar their reputation. And they won't do it. And so they left. Why is E&I out? Why is E&I in dispute? When we know that if we basically engage properly and do the right thing and make sure that practices that are basically clear in the world is done when it comes to what E&I was doing with Springfield, we have resolved the problem. We didn't do that. We believe we can resolve that easily. We think that we can engage the players and make sure the low-hanging fruits, which is basically, for example, the Aker block, we can develop that quickly. These and other incentives that we believe will give investors to come with a sense that a new government that is in is going very, very, very transparent and not engage in acts of corruption will attract investment. And we believe that will open the door for the industry again.
Well, the first issue I've learned in the upstream petroleum sector is policy consistency and predictability. The big boys want a certain level of consistency. If you say these are the incentives, stay with it. What they don't want is when you vacillate and you do that, it creates a lot of problems. And so that is number one. Number two are the incentives themselves. So if you take surface rental, if somebody is going into deep waters or ultra deep, the incentives cannot be the same as shallow waters. And then the acreage itself, the size, it ought to be attractive enough. And so we've learned from some of the failures of this government, and that will guide.
What about your own failures in the past? Have you learned from it?
Well, maybe one of our failures was that we weren't bragging like this government brags, and that we weren't touting our achievements, yes, and sloganeerism like this government does. Because clearly, Chief, the records are there to show. 8 years, you haven't added even one oil field. Meanwhile, somebody handed over 3 to you. It takes some effort to do that. So that is one issue that we think we should look at. And if we do that, we can attract some of the big boys. But the president himself has also stated that he will do a road show on assumption of office and to send a signal that Ghana is ready to do business. We'll do it in a transparent manner where we want local participation, set out the guidelines like Ben is saying. Don't go and pick your friend and just allot the 5% to them like we've seen with AGM. While they were doing that in June, they were forming another company. And then they gave the 5%. They have no track record. The oil sector is capital intensive. You can sink 150 million and you achieve nothing. So you need companies with deep pockets and with enough expertise in the sector. And if you do that, I'm sure that you can build that kind of confidence and will ramp up oil production, which will benefit the economy. Yeah. There was a second one. CBOD. You see, why you are not getting the dollars is that dollars that would have come to the central bank, which would have been used to auction for you. Somebody is going to form a company in Dubai, and they are doing links with BOST and out competing you. And in economics, when you do A, you must give out B. It's very difficult to achieve what we call Pareto efficiency, or what the economists would say the impossible trinity. You can't do that, the trilemma. You can't do that. So if you decide that under your goal for oil, you want to keep the forex, then you'll be staffing CBOD. I even thought that, and worst case scenario, assuming you even want to do gold for oil, involve all the industry players. Make it transparent, make it fair. That when we sell the gold, that forex will be escrowed. And we would do a competitive process. All of you bid. Whoever brings out something good, we allocate the dollars to you. At least that could even be a bit more rational. But when you use a government entity and you do, look, you see, this is a live program, and we give you a lot of reverence. So some of the things we know, and some of the things we see, We cannot say them here. People have just cooked their own deal and they want to do things to the detriment of this country.
I think we need to, thank our panelists for their generosity.
CBOD. CBOD is the epitome of the word that was used. Sikampe. They are big boys, so they didn't talk. But I think if you ask me to give you an advice to CBOD, I would say maybe going forward. I know you are big guys. You don't talk too much, but you need to make sure that when they are hitting you, you stand up. Because what has happened to you in the last 2 years with gold for oil, I think you were a little too quiet for too long. I'll just say so. That's what I thought.
All right. I think I need to thank our panelists for their generosity tonight. I've got just 3 final questions, and I'll allow the Chief Executive Officer of CBOD to conclude. They're very, very tired. I'm just using my powers, my veto powers, to keep them here. Else they would have walked out. So 3 questions. Let me see your hands up, please. Duncan, you're overruled. Madam, your name? No, please, let's get a better microphone for her.
Good evening. My name is Bernadine Aram, and I work with Oil Terminal. Now, when Central was set up, we all had this scare that what if Central starts tracking out and the storage facilities are left off. So I want to know, what is your plan for storage facilities that Central does not become a local distributor? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, but well, if you recall, we're told that they brought 300 tankers, and they wanted to take over the transportation sector with 300 tankers. What you don't allow in this sector is for one foreign entity to control the entire value chain. And so if you recall, the minority really kicked against that and stated that you can't have that integrated system with Central. If you have that integrated system, it even has national security implications. So let them process it. Let Ghanaians do the distribution and the sale of the petroleum products so that it can be fair and equitable. Thank you.
Second question. The former energy minister has also overruled me. He says I should give you the power to... You're a former minister.
Question, let me... Patrick is telling me to continue.
Okay.
So when you have Central, supposed to refine crude, which is the license you have given, and then you see here that they are also now bringing refined products and selling, knowing very well that is not a license you granted, and then they crowd out the BDC guys. I want to know from my seniors. But that is a side. That one, Patrick said I should ask that one, so that is not my main. Please. Just today, fuel prices have gone up again. And it's likely that will be sustained for the next 2 weeks or the next 1 or 2 months. Chief, you mentioned Sunon Asogli, 300 million debt. They are deciding to turn off their plants. It's turned off. Okay. I have said to people that we are managing the energy sector now with a lot of propaganda and talk. And that where you have debts that are mounting, somebody has got to pay for it. There's no plan whatsoever. ESLA has been collateralized, like he had mentioned. So meaning we've taken a loan already, we've blown the money. The debts are mounting. According to ASAP, every month, some 67 million USD is added to the debt, meaning that we are not out of the hole, we are digging further. Chief, personally, I have switched to solar because of foresight. I'm aware that after elections, doomsday may come again. It is not that we will or you wish, but due to the crippling financing issues in the sector. For that.
Dr.
Let the gentleman finish and I'll have the single mooring facility, which most of my members who deliberately moved close to me were pushing that you need to ask and seek for clarity with regards to the single mooring facility and your policy direction in terms of how you intend dealing with the private sector in owning such strategic investments. You look at Nigeria, for instance. Dangote, for instance, have got direct so that they can also discharge and then even export as and when. So we welcome that policy direction in terms of opening our coast up. Another, keep to your word. We know from history, and not only here, you check Colombia, Argentina, anywhere that storage and transport company has been involved in trading, it has always ended up in losses. We want to know that if BOST is to keep strategic stock, and then also our members are also more than willing to even keep that. We accept the challenge, and like before BOST even were doing that, it was our members who actually kept the country going without it, because there was a point in time that BOST itself was struggling. That it was our members that kept the whole nation with. And even if you remember, in the case of Russian Ukraine, the toll, tankerage, and others to store products so that they can pump to the rest of West Africa, rather than keeping their vessels on the sea, supported the entire chamber to bid with entities that are well, and I just don't want to mention them, the top 5 BDCs to put in a proposal. To our surprise, we received a rejection that our follow-up was not even welcome. We just want to also hold you by your word that an open and transparent tender processes, and that will leverage on our members' ability to do that. Another thing that I also want to challenge you and your team, that the issue that our private sector is not necessarily interested in putting up storage facilities in Savlugu or anywhere, it's never the case that we are not willing. You check our investment in storage facility in the Western region, for instance. It's more than the nation, and that has even kept government recent policy of zonalization afloat. So once the enabling environment is provided and the right protection is given, we dare challenge you that in terms of even pipelines and then the storage facilities, we are more than willing to do that. No, this was just more or less a summary of what has transpired. Our question is, we also want to firm up from you, because you talk about the upstream. If the upstream companies are even complaining about frequent policy changes and all that, even with them, that in their PAs, they push for stabilization clauses. Can you imagine these private sectors that invested in tank farms that you pick permits from that within a space of 2 years? If it was any IOTC, they would have taken a state that it changes the physicals of their regime. If it was, if we are talking about this particular,
I think what Dr. Ofori has said is,
and sometimes he ends up briefing me. I'm telling you, which means that he's very, very awake, and he's engaged with a lot of you here, and he learns a lot. So we would only be his lieutenants, and our work, irrespective of where we find ourselves, will be to prosecute his agenda. And I know that President Mama wouldn't allow some of the things that we're experiencing today to happen, because he's very wide awake, he is very engaging, and sometimes he's even ahead of his ministers. So clearly, you can be sure that we'll be whipped in line and to do what is right and proper. But let me send a caution. That's a caution. Any attempt to extend the contracts on that mooring facility, we would not honor it because it ought to come to Parliament. There's no justification, and we cannot support that. 2, we've cautioned Tema Oil Refinery. From what we are seeing, this whole process is a rigged process. It does appear that somebody has been pre-selected and they are just trying to teleguide it. Normally, with just 2 months elections, you don't even do some of these major things. And so to the senior staff of Tema Oil Refinery, don't allow this to happen. Because you would have yourself to be blamed if an incompetent entity is eventually selected. But let me thank all of you. Let me thank everybody. When we're talking, I saw a lot of people nodding their heads. All what we've assured you and talked about would remain in abeyance if we do not have that power and mandate from the ordinary Ghanaian. We've enumerated very, very tangible, measurable policy proposals that can turn around the sector. But that will remain on paper if we do not have your mandate. I therefore encourage all Ghanaians watching this program to vote massively for President Mahama and the NDC. We cannot continue this slide. Enough is enough. We must reset this country. We must do what is right and proper. The day of accountability must come. And the NDC and President Mahama must be given the mandate to correct this negative trend we are witnessing. Thank you very much.
A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for the Honorable Ama Bua Kofi, who is Member of Parliament for Elembele constituency and also former Energy Minister. He's also the Deputy Minority Leader in Parliament. Also, a round of applause to the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapo, who's Member of Parliament for Yape Kushigu and Chairman of the Energy Committee, National Democratic Congress. He's also ranking member on the Energy and Mines, as well as the Finance Committee of Parliament. A big thank you to the Honorable Edward Bawa, his MP for Bongo constituency, member of the Mines and Energy Committee as well. Also, big thanks to Honorable Thomas Ampimnyaku, his Member of Parliament for Isujaman constituency, and also the Honorable Richard Jan Mensah, who's MP for Gomwa West constituency. I need to remind you that we're going to take a group photograph after this session, so please just don't be in a hurry to leave. But before we leave, my final plea to you, just take your mobile phones. We've got to do a quick feedback. Take your mobile phones and go to... What's it? Is it Mentimeter? Menti.com. Menti.com. Please take your mobile phones. Let's go to Menti.com. Yes, Menti.com. And then I'm going to guide you to go through this very, very shortly. How satisfied were you with the overall organization of the town hall meeting? We've got very satisfied, satisfied, neutral, and dissatisfied. Please, let's walk through this quickly. Yes, so, yes, how satisfied were you? There's a code up there, yes. So it will tell you to put in the code. The code is 5279-4920. 5279-4920. 5279-4920. First question, how satisfied were you with the overall organization of the town hall meeting? And the second question, how informative did you find the opening remarks by the political party representative, and in this case, the Honorable John Abdullahi Jinapo? How satisfied or how informative did you find his opening remarks? We've got very informative, neutral, not very informative, and not informative at all. I can bet nobody will go for the last one. And then maybe the final one, how useful were the presentations from the energy experts and the stakeholders? How useful were the presentations from the energy experts and stakeholders? We've got extremely useful, very useful, somewhat useful, not very useful, and not useful at all. And then maybe the very final one. Did the question and answer session address your concerns or questions about energy policies? Did the question and answer sessions address your concerns or questions about energy policies? We've got yes, very well. We've got yes, somewhat. No, not really. And no, not at all. How would you rate the balance between political viewpoints and expert insights during the discussions? How would you rate the balance between political viewpoints and expert insights during the discussions? We've got excellent, good, average, poor, very poor. So this is the very last one. This is the very last one. And then how effective do you think this event was in addressing the energy challenges facing your community? How effective do you think this event was in addressing the energy challenges facing community? Very effective, effective, neutral, not very effective, and not effective at all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Just before I go, there was this question about what you intend to do with the Jomoro Petroleum Hub. What do you intend to do about this? It's a question that came in from... Oh, that's your... Yes, you've got to answer it.
Well, the fact of the matter is that for a government that has gone to John Morrow to say they are building a fertilizer plant, it never happened, and told them maybe then 3 months to leaving power, they forcibly go get 50,000 acres. That's basically the whole of John Morrow district. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make any sense, actually. When every expert says that what they wanted to do there can be done with just 5,000 acres. So obviously, President Mahama has said it, and we've said it. This is something we'll review. If we have to do a petroleum project in the Jomoro district, it will be done, but we won't take their 50,000 acres of land. That land will be given back to the people of Jomoro.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And I appreciate your coming here. Thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedules to join us here. This very insightful program. So you've heard from the NPP. You've now heard from the NDC. The vote is in your hands. You determine who implements their policies come 2025. Thank you very much. My name is Parkwisi Asari. On behalf of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors, I want to say a big thank you to you. Hopefully in 4 years' time. Please, let's take our pictures. Let's take our pictures.
Asampaetia, Obanyansa Fusu, Bunuya, one can asam. They mouth to some cacre was supreme. Yo, coffee, oh my, a woman, oh money, a mamma, Yenny baby, I call, what I warren. One some, one in pa, as I did power of you. Asampaetia, Obanyansa Fusu, Bunuya, one can asam. They mouth to some cacre was supreme. Yo, coffee, oh my, a woman, oh money, a mamma, Yenny baby, I call, what I warren. One some, one in pa, as I Adepa